Welcome to another OU Insider post-game ass-kicking podcast. My name is Brandon Drumm. I'm here with Parker Thune. We are in a Holiday Inn in Arlington. And Oklahoma lost 55-24. If you didn't know, they did. And they are not very good. At least right now. The weird part, Parker, is how positive everybody was in the postgame. Wasn't that like odd? Like, does Danny Stutzman ever had a bad day? Like, honestly, he acts like there's nothing wrong, and I think that's probably part of the issue. I'm not just singling him out because he's a great guy. He's gonna be a good football player. He is a good football player. He's having a rough go right now. But how can you do that? How can you watch what we've watched for the last 2 weeks and say everything's okay? It's not okay. It's not okay. 7 penalties, 80 yards, almost 100 yards last week. Go ahead, Parker. Help me. Jump in on this bullcrap, man.
I can't help you, Brandon. It reminds me of the scene in Moneyball where Brad Pitt's character walks into the locker room after they've lost again, shuts everything down, and goes, "Is losing fun?" and makes a player answer the rhetorical question. Makes him say, "Yes." And then he goes, "What are you having fun for?" No one should be having fun right now at Oklahoma because nothing about this is fun. Nothing was enjoyable about that game today. And first things first, prayers up to Damon Harmon because obviously we do not know the severity, the extent of that injury, but it looked bad. It looked scary. Anytime they're immobilizing you and stretching you off.
I talked to somebody actually after the game about it.
And do we have any indication of?
Yeah. So this person obviously is around them every day. The staffer. Okay. You probably know who I'm talking about.
I think I would think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Tracking. Continue.
Okay. And I pulled under the side as they were walking into the tunnel, and I said, "How is he doing? Is he going to be okay?" And he said, "Look, I think it's precautionary. He just kind of got bent back, had some back problems." And then Brent Venables kind of reiterated that in the presser. So obviously prayers still up for Damon Harmon, but I think everything's going to be all right in the end. Like, hopefully he's not out for an extended period of time. Hopefully everything gets cleared whenever they get through it. But I mean, it was a scary situation.
It obviously was, and that's a good dude, and you can't help but hope that he's going to be all right and won't miss substantial time. It seems pretty inevitable that he's going to miss some time, no doubt. But that obviously in the late stages, that football game kind of took precedence over everything that had happened on the field leading up to it. But there's no way to sugarcoat this. There's no way to spin this, Brandon. That was the worst game Oklahoma's played maybe since the John Blake era. That's not out of the question. All things considered, because they've had bad losses before.
Yeah, the LSU and Peach Bowl.
They've had plenty of bad losses between the John Blake era and now. But when you're talking about the quality of the opponent, and this is no knock on TCU, but that's not a team that you should have allowed to put up 668 yards of offense on you.
No. We're looking at the stats, folks. So I got the stats pulled up on the computer. The cameras above us. And it is not pretty. I don't like, I'm like speechless looking at it. Like, I literally, when I'm trying to like formulate words, they don't want to come out. Like, you need nothing, because I don't know that I can put what we saw into words. It was laughable. I literally started laughing at one point during the game. And then I think it was when Deshaun White and Justin Harrington they started doing a pirouette you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like the 65-yard run. Yeah, I was
There
like,
were
oh my
there
gosh.
were so many blown assignments defensively. So many. Some of them were very conspicuous. Danny Stutzman sold out and didn't contain on the read option play that Max Duggan took 67 yards to the house. You had two pass plays of 60 plus yards that went the distance. In total, Oklahoma allowed four offensive plays that went for touchdowns of over 60 yards.
Bad.
That can't happen.
Oh.
Regardless of who you are, regardless of who the opponent is, at the Division I level in the sport of football, that just shouldn't happen. There's no reason for that to occur. And that right there is one of the many testaments from a statistical standpoint to how bad this effort was from Oklahoma defensively. And what's astonishing, Brandon, is we sat here a week ago and what was the sentiment? Well, there's really nowhere to go but up. Like,
Right.
at least you know that's the worst defensive performance you're going to see all year. Turns out it wasn't even close to it. Not even close to it.
So can we talk scheme, I guess, for a minute? Like, can we talk scheme? Like,
Sure.
why the heck are they running a 3-man front without a true nose tackle? Like, I am bewildered by that. I get Isaiah Coe is a true nose. Like, he's a good true nose.
Yeah.
But he can't play every down. And he's not in there. Like, Jeffrey Johnson is a big guy, but he's a 3-tech. Jalen Redmond is not a nose. He's an athletic 3-tech. He can actually play the 4-eye, and the 5. Like, that is probably his true position, is the 4-eye, 5, and 3. Those are best suited for him. I don't understand why they don't go back to a 4-man front, or at least an odd man 4-man front. And what I mean by, folks that don't understand this, what I mean by an odd 4-man front is a shift over where it looks like a 3-man front, and you pull the jackbacker down to be kind of your offset defensive end, 7-tech, 5-tech, however you want to line up, however you want to shade him. And it all depends on, obviously, the alignment that the opponent's offense is doing. So the other thing I have questions about, and I'm going to ask people about this week, at what point do we start seeing Robert Spears-Jennings at safety? At what point do we start seeing Jaron Kanik more? Like, well, I think that has to happen because the Deshaun White, and I think he's a great person. I think he's a very good linebacker. Very good linebacker. He cannot cover in space. Like, I think he lost too much weight to play linebacker now. Honestly.
He looks very, very trim.
Yes.
I don't know that that's a good thing.
No.
Here's what I will say, and it kind of echoes what you just hit on there, Brandon. I had a couple conversations with folks driving back, and the reality is, on the heels of a performance like that, you got to ask some tough questions, and you got to make some tough decisions. And we know for a fact this is not scheme related. The Sooners struggles defensively. We know for a fact it's not scheme related. That's not the core of the issue. Is that contributing? Perhaps.
Yeah.
Could there be some corrections made? Sure. But when you look at Brent Venables' track record as a defensive play caller, there's no reason why, regardless of what the front is, the Sooners should be giving up almost 700 yards of offense.
Well, he had these same issues at Clemson when he first got to Clemson, too. With the same defense.
And here's the thing. We look at those numbers. 668 yards, 361 of them on the ground. It could have been far worse.
Yeah.
When Oklahoma went up to Nebraska on September 17th, after that game, we sat here and said, yeah, Oklahoma could have named their score. TCU could have done that today as well.
Yeah.
They were scoring at will on this Oklahoma defense. At will. Whatever they wanted, they got it. And at a certain point, you have to look at your starting 11, and you got to make some tough decisions as to which of these guys actually give us
Right.
the best chance to win a football game. Now, I will say this. The Sooners are going to have to shuffle the deck. That's going to be a necessity going forward because so many guys are hurt.
Yeah.
We talked about Damon Harmon. We haven't talked yet about the fact that Billy Bowman sat out the majority of the game.
You would think he'd be back next week, though, right? Like,
you would think
he
so.
was moving around.
He was,
fine.
He was moving fine, but still, that opens up a whole different can of worms about the return game, because one of the things we had talked about before the season is, do you really want your best players returning kicks and potentially opening them up to injury in a greater capacity in that type of context? But that aside, Billy Bowman sat out the vast majority of that football game. Marcus Stripling and R. Mason Thomas didn't travel, so you were down your two edge rushers.
Yep.
I'm trying to think defensively. Did anybody else come out? You look at the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel left the game with that concussion in the second quarter. Marcus Major did not travel. Eric Gray was sidelined in the third quarter, or was the early fourth.
They're just decimated, man.
Theo Weiss came out of the game. Wanye Morris was in a sling out of the game by the second quarter, out of pads by halftime. Anton Harrison came out of the game at one point, although he did re-enter. McCade Mathier was conspicuously banged up. Andrew Rame limped off the field with help from a couple of teams.
Jumped on one leg. He could not put pressure on his right foot or leg coming off it was bad. We thought
this team
came back out
is not only coming off their worst performance. I mean, I'm just going to call it like this. There's no way they have a worse performance than that this season, because it's unfathomable.
Calling his shot right now. It is fathomable to me. I'm sorry, it's fathomable. I think Texas honestly could lay 60 on them if they come out and play like this next week.
Okay, so not only are you coming off what we fully expect would be your worst performance of the season, the worst performance defensively that we've seen from an Oklahoma team in years, maybe decades, but you are ravaged by injury right now.
Yeah.
And severities are yet to be determined, but there are a couple injuries in particular that really, really sting. Obviously, not having Billy Bowman was big, because the Sooners busted several coverages on the back end, and you can't help but wonder, would those have happened if you have Billy Bowman?
Probably not. Probably not.
But on the offensive side, man,
it shows lack of depth, though, man. It shows the lack of depth.
Yeah,
honestly,
no, it is lack of depth and lack of quality depth. Because there's plenty of depth, it's just not good depth.
And the crazy thing is everybody at the safety position, when you go back and you look at the recruiting rankings and you look at who they were coming out of high school, they were good players. So what is going on? And I want to ask you this. Being that Grinch's defense was just so simple, players did not have to think a whole lot. They just ran around and made plays, right?
Sure.
There wasn't a lot of disguising coverages. There wasn't a lot of disguising blitzes or, changing post-snap what you were doing pre-snap or anything like that. Because of that, and the sheer nature and the culture of Oklahoma's defense for the last, I don't know, decade. I mean, 2015 was the last time they were worth anything, I think, defensively. I mean, I guess they were good in 2020, and they were okay last year. But they were okay last year in 2020 because of their sheer talent. And I would probably say the same thing in 2021. It was off talent. All those dudes are in the NFL. So my question is Venables' defense too intricate right now?
No.
For what they're trying to do with the mental capacity of some of the players that they have, because of, it's not like they're not smart. They're smart.
Sure.
But it's the fact that they haven't had to do those things and think on the fly and be so precise in everything that they have to do defensively. Because Venables' defense, if you're off a yard, you're off a mile. That's just how it works.
Sure. No, I don't think it's too intricate. Because I think you look at the very simple things. Oklahoma's not even doing those well defensively. They're not sealing the edge. They're not tackling. Oh my goodness, are they not tackling?
That's all they did all week was work on tackle, like literally all week. And that may be part of the injuries, that their bodies are so banged up because they just killed each other all week. So what do you do? Like, what is Venables has to figure out a way. He's already tried the physical way during the week. Now what do you do? What do you do?
Well, and that question applies to so many different facets of what we witnessed today. Like, where do you go from here? But I think the prevailing question right now has to be, what do you do next week if Dillon Gabriel isn't available? Because I think it's very clear. And look, a lot of people, understandably, were taking to social media to criticize Gabriel for his performance up until the injury, because he missed quite a few throws that should have been made.
Can I ask you a question on that, though?
Well,
okay, finish your sentence. I want to ask you a question because this pertains to Dillon Gabriel. Okay, go
yes. Ahead. But if what you saw today wasn't a clear indicator of the reality that there is a massive gap between Dillon Gabriel and the rest of that quarterback room, I don't know what to tell you. Because what we saw today from the quarterback position, Brandon, post Gabriel's injury, lends absolutely zero confidence that Oklahoma can go to the Cotton Bowl next weekend and win, because that offense was anemic after Gabriel left the ball game.
Yeah, it was really bad. I mean, the very first pass that Bevel tried to make was literally should have been just a little toss to Gray. And he would have had, 20, 30 yards on that play too. It was well designed, well called. There. And instead, exactly what was supposed to happen. You're supposed to have somebody in your face as a quarterback when you do that. That's to draw the defender to you and have the running back slip behind, dump it off, and let him run out in space. He darts it at him, like scared to death, tense as can be, and throws it behind Gray. And you're just like, wow, how do you miss that? Gray was literally 3 yards in front of you, dude. All you had to do was literally just loft it to him and then just let him go. Instead, he threw a bullet behind him. Like, so at that point in time, you knew he was tense. But my question about Dillon's performance before the injury, fans, you're not going to like this question.
Oh, boy.
And I really don't care. I care that y'all listen. I love that y'all listen. I don't want you mad at us, or me in particular. But some of you all decided to blame Dillon last week. Stupidly. It was stupid. It was stupid. 330 plus yards passing, 4 touchdowns, 68% completion percentage, and he ran for 80 yards. That is not a stat line where I blame a quarterback at all.
No.
Okay. So my question is, and look, I'm not saying, and there's multiple ways you can look at this question, and multiple ways we can break this thing down. Okay. Because I'm going to pose it to you. All the criticism they got, and it was pretty bad by some. You saw it. Yeah. I saw it.
Sure.
Did that get him tensing up a little bit, do you think, today? Just a little bit, like maybe in his head a little bit as he went out there to play? I like put more pressure on himself to try to perform even better than he was, which honestly, he was performing better than 90% of the quarterbacks in America at that point. So he's put unjust pressure on himself that didn't need to happen.
Yeah.
Because you could see it when he overthrew balls, when he overthrew passes, everything seemed pushed and forced. So the fans, my point is, and my question is, do you think fans should maybe think about before they do that? Because like the yips happen.
The yips do happen. And it almost, like, I almost tweeted that because it really did seem like he had the yips there for a minute. But I don't think it has as much to do with the fans and the expectations as it does with
just a question. I thought
no, and I will say this, I think it has more to do with the game situation.
Yeah,
because you got to consider what happened right off the bat for Oklahoma. They get the ball first, and Marvin Mims fumbles it away.
He got a first down, right?
Yeah,
and then fumble. Like
and TCU,
what was the first play? Because I missed it. We'll get into that later on. TCU traffic.
There's been
sucks.
so much that has happened between.
What do you think of TCU setup? By the way, it's the worst in the world, isn't it?
I'm not a fan of the TCU experience, but we don't need it.
All right. Anyways,
Here's what I will say. I think Dylan Gabriel could have played the entire game today. The Sooners could have been beaten just as soundly.
Probably
And
wouldn't have, though. I don't think
well,
so.
no, they wouldn't
Because
have.
they were
But
starting to make kind of a run, it looked like, starting to
and
get things together.
regardless of how many throws he missed at the beginning of the game, I'd have still sat here and said he is way down on the list of things that need to be fixed and things that need to change for this team. Because right now, it doesn't matter who you have playing quarterback. You can put Kyler Murray out there, but TCU could have hung 70 points on the board today, and you weren't winning that football game, regardless of who was playing quarterback.
Right.
So until things change on defense and change significantly, until we see a wholesale shift in the very nature, the way that defense is played in Norman, Oklahoma, it does not matter who is taking the snaps. Oklahoma's ceiling is only so high. And right now, in what looks like a very competitive Big 12, it's real hard to get optimistic about where this Oklahoma team is going to go if Gabriel misses significant time.
Yeah.
Because, as I said a moment ago, the gap between him and the rest of the quarterback room is huge. And so when you're talking about the quarterback that gives you the best chance to go and win football games, it's Dylan Gabriel by a mile. And if Dylan Gabriel isn't in the picture, Brandon, I don't know if there's a quarterback on that roster right now that is capable of going and winning you football games if the defense plays half as poorly as it did today.
Yeah. What do you think the odds are he plays next week? What, 30% maybe at most?
I think they're low.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. What you also have to consider is that there's going to be an increased stigma about concussions because of what just happened with Tua Tagovailoa. So there's going to be an urge to play the cautious route with Gabriel, even if he is ready by next week.
Yeah.
So right now, I do not expect him to take the field in the Cotton Bowl. And if he is not on the field, I don't know, man. Oklahoma's odds to win that game do not look good.
I'll say this, and I know it doesn't mean much, but whatever. I don't think the odds are good for Oklahoma to beat Texas. I'm going to say right now, just mainly because Tua's out, and mainly because I don't know that anybody trusts this defense at all. Like at some point, and it's so weird that you go up to Nebraska. Nebraska's got a good offense, and you just completely dominate them. But K-State kind of gave everybody the blueprint on what to do, and TCU did not run their normal offense, by the way. If you notice today, they were running a lot of 6- and 7-man front on the line. Exactly what K-State does. And essentially it was just like, you're not getting back here. You're not going to get back at our quarterback. And since you're not going to have any pressure, we're going to be able to completely put pressure on your defensive backs who we don't think are very good. And that's what they did.
It was a brilliant game plan because when you have a whole crop of receivers that are 6'5", like TCU does, heck, take those one-on-one matchups. Put that extra man in protection to make sure your quarterback isn't under duress as he delivers.
No,
it was a brilliant game plan.
The tight end blocked so much. I was literally making note of it the whole game. I was like, 18, he's going to stay in block. Yep. 6-man front block. And you got the running back. If he would sit there and wait. If nobody was back there after 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, he would veer out and try to see if he could get open as well. So you still would have three or four guys out, or 3 guys out running routes, basically, essentially, or 4. And you would have the 6 guys blocking. I mean, it was brilliant. You got 5 guys rushing, 6 guys blocking. The odds are the offense are going to win those 90% of the time because, and this isn't, again, I guess it's a knock on the defensive front. You could do that at Clemson because they had supermen up front, like literally superstars. And right now, to BV's credit, they're getting, and Bates and Chavis, they're getting those dudes in. They got some in 2022. They got some in 2021. They got them coming in 2023. The fact of the matter is they're young. They're young and they're inexperienced. So you're not going to see a lot of those guys play a whole bunch. You saw Grayson Halton play again. He's going to be a really good player for Oklahoma. You saw Kelvin Gilliam play. He's going to be a really good player for Oklahoma. Everybody knows R. Mason Thomas is going to be a superstar. And I'm honestly wondering how much does R. Mason Thomas bring back to the table defensively, pass rush wise, because of who he is. He's nasty on the pass rush. Third down, you always have 32 in there, right? Like it seemed like they always put 32 in there, pin their ears back, and it caused a problem. Somebody was getting a sack because R. Mason Thomas was coming off the edge. So I'm interested to see when he comes back for Texas, because I was told he's going to be back for Texas. How does that up the ante for the pass rush for Oklahoma? And it's weird to say that because he's a freshman, but he's a bad dude.
You want to hear the parallel?
Go ahead.
Last year, you heard a lot of buzz in preseason camp about Danny Stutzman, right? Really shows out through the first 2 games, but gets hurt in that second game of the year in a pretty meaningless situation.
Yep.
Sits out until the Texas game. But when he comes back,
played great.
Made a couple of very pivotal plays down the stretch.
Yeah.
Is that going to be the same mark for our Mason Thomas here in 2022? Man, I need to see that guy on the field a lot next week.
Yeah,
because at this point, it's what you have isn't working. And if it hasn't worked against Kansas State and it hasn't worked against TCU, it sure as hell is not going to work against Texas or Baylor or Oklahoma State. You've got to change things up. You got to give dudes looks, even if you're not entirely comfortable with it. I was having a conversation with, I won't disclose their identity out of respect, but somebody who is close to the team. He and I were having a discussion on my drive over here. And one of the things he said was, look, when it comes to the younger guys, at a certain point, you have to acknowledge that playing your veterans is what gives you predictable outcomes, right? And that's probably what leads you to feel pretty good about them in comparison to the rest of the stable. But at what point do you say, okay, it's probably time to ditch the predictable outcomes and see where the unpredictable ones get?
Yeah.
Because right now it does not get much worse than this. If you're Oklahoma, you are dead last in the Big 12 through 2 weeks, and your defensive recipe
not working.
It's completely useless right now.
Yeah. And I don't know where the fix comes from. I think the fix ultimately has to come from up front first. And I think, first off, Oklahoma fans, rejoice and be glad, because A&M got beat 42-24 today. Rejoice. Off the Hicks debacle, Oklahoma needed that. I know that they got killed today too, but the fact of the matter is both teams got spanked, and spanked hard.
Misery loves company, I suppose.
It does. So I guess the two teams that David Hicks chose between played absolutely brutal on defense today. Just awful. So there's that. Anyways, but so where is the fix on defense? Like I said, I think you have to start up front, maybe. Maybe you do. And how do you do that? Like, who do you play? Obviously, you need more R. Mason Thomas when he comes back. You need more Jalen Redmond, right? You need more, because Jalen Redmond got in the backfield quite a bit again. I just want him to be under control when he gets in the backfield. That's probably like his biggest. Like, he falls down, like he gets all. It seems like he gets like so excited. He gets through. He's like, oh man, and he's like chasing after him all the time. So I think you got to play R. Mason Thomas more. You got to play Jalen Redmond more. I honestly think Ethan Downs has been fairly good on the edge. I don't think he's been a problem. He's made plays.
He hasn't been an issue.
He has not. They do not go to his when they go outside. It's not Ethan Downs that's getting sucked in. I can tell you that. I'm not pointing fingers to the other guy. but I'm telling you who it is. Telling you who it is without naming them. And they do not go to Ethan Downs' side a lot. And a lot of times, Ethan Downs will come from the backside and make a play. He did it 3 or 4 times again today on a run play. And so I think you got to play him. I don't know that he's the best pass rusher, the greatest pass rusher, because I don't think that's like his strength yet. He's still trying to learn how to use his hands and everything. But the other interior guy is kind of in question, and I honestly like Kelvin Gilliam. I think you need to play him more. I do. Get him some reps. Get him in the game. See what he can do. He's a good player. And I think you have to play Jaren Kanak. Like, if you don't play Jaren Kanak, I like I don't get it. Parker, I don't get it. And I know Teddy Lehman didn't like he was all selling you like enough with the Jaren Kanak needs to play more crap. But after today, can we say it? Can we literally say
needs to play more?
He needs to play more. Like Deshaun White, I love the guy, man, but God, like that the first big play that they had, you know who that was, right? There was Deshaun White just got a crick in his neck watching the dude run behind him by 20 yards. It was like I used to make a joke in college. Do you remember Eric Bassey? Do you remember Eric Bassey?
Yeah.
I used to call him Eric Burn Me Deep Bassey.
Oh boy.
But he actually ended up being really good.
Hopefully he's not listening.
No, but he ended up being really good. It was just like his first time out there at safety. He would probably tell you that, honestly. But he ended up being a really good player for Oklahoma. But like Deshaun White got lost several times, Parker.
Yeah.
Like just straight lost. He is not a safety. He's not a deep guy. They've got to figure out somebody that's more athletic. Guess who's fast and can run and has played safety in high school? You know who that guy is? He wears number 7.
Yeah, he does. And look, there's a time and a place to complain about personnel. And for the most part, I'm not big on XYZ player sucks. We should replace him with XYZ other
anybody
player.
sucks.
But I will say this. You hear that all the time from fans.
Yeah.
And 90% of the time, it doesn't carry any merit because 90% of the time, it's in reference to a guy like Dylan Gabriel. And I always go back to what Mike Zimmer said about Kellen Mond, right? When the Vikings were having struggles at the quarterback position when Kirk Cousins was out. And a reporter asked Mike Zimmer, hey, why don't you try Kellen Mond? Why don't you feel the need to see him on Sunday? And Mike Zimmer said, because I see him every day in practice. So
that's fair.
That holds up generally across the board. And when a coach has a certain player playing over another player, it's generally because that player is better.
Yeah.
But again, I said there's a time and a place to start having discussions about personnel and who needs to play more. And this is the time and place.
Yeah.
Because it literally does not get any worse than what you saw today.
No, it was there's literally so people are going to ask, is there a recruiting fallout to this?
Thus far, there's been the opposite of a recruiting fallout. There's been a recruiting coalition. Dalen Smothers started the hashtag TrustBV on social media. Eric McCarty has already retweeted it.
It's a bad dude right there.
Samuel Masigo tweeted support for OU. Makari Vickers tweeted, I know we're not losing next week, and then announced he'd be coming to the OU Texas game, accompanied by a picture of him throwing the horns down. I'm trying to think who else has come out and said something publicly in the aftermath here. But the end of it all, for the most part, it seems as though it's actually had the opposite effect on these guys.
Yeah.
For the most part, across the board, it feels like everybody has concurred with Dalen Smothers' sentiment that, hey, we're gonna trust the vision here. We're gonna trust the process, And I know the origin of trust the process was those awful 76ers teams of the early 2010s.
Yeah.
And hopefully it doesn't come to that for Oklahoma or anything close to that. But I think what became evident today is that this is a long way from a finished product. And there is a lot of work to be done if Oklahoma is to be competitive, not just in the Big 12, but once they make the transition to the SEC.
Yeah. I saw things from, I believe I was on Instagram and I was seeing things from Anthony Evans. And there was one person saying, like, you sure you don't want to rethink Oklahoma and stuff like that? And he shared it on his story. But then he came back and he was like, look, I got 3 months and I'm going to change this thing kind of deal. So it seems like you got that. I think the one guy that, and, he always tells me, like, I'm 100% locked in. I'm not looking at anybody else. I'm not going to look at Texas. I'm not going to do this or that. Is Colton Vasek. And I think that's the one guy Oklahoma fans are like, please don't leave, because he is a bad dude. Like, he is a bad dude.
Yes.
He's a bad dude.
Certified.
And,
stamped.
Yeah. And so I don't know about that. And then you see, like, I thought it was Twitter, I thought Rivals was like, Georgia is looking at, Jackson Arnold. Dude, that's laughable.
Please.
Like, come on.
Well,
Like,
and here's the thing. You also have to look at the other side of the coin in all of this, right? And that is to say that on the one hand, the typical the average fan is going to look at a situation like this and their first thought is going to be, oh, why would XYZ player want any part of this? They should just decommit while they can. But on the contrary, if you're somebody like Derek LeBlanc and you just witnessed that today, what are you probably sitting there thinking? I can get on the field next year.
Yeah.
I can change this thing.
Yeah. And they tweeted out, like, we're 100% with Oklahoma. We're not going anywhere. We're behind Coach Venables. We know he's going to change the program, all that type of stuff. So I think Oklahoma fans need to take a deep breath. And I think if you're Peyton Bowen, that's probably another thing. And Ryan Yates, you're looking at that going, dude, I'm getting on the field in year one if I go to Oklahoma. Like, year one. And so I know it's a bad look, but at the same time, I think Oklahoma coaches are going to use this loss to their advantage. Similarly, like Texas has done, where, they're 5-7, they go out and have a number 3 class in the country type deal. And I'm not saying that's what Oklahoma's going to end up with. I think they'll end up with a top 5 class, 4-7, 5, 6, 7 class. They'll end up with a class that you can win a national title with. How about that? And I don't think they're far from done getting guys. And I think the more people watch, because they know, like, what Brent Venables can do is he can go back to 2011 and 2012 of his time at Clemson, and he can say, look, this defense was bad. Like, they were not great at Clemson. I remember they got like 77 points or something like that handed to them by, what was it, West Virginia at one point in a bowl game. But the very next year, they were one of the best defenses in the country. And so that's what I'm telling fans. Like, you can be upset about all this. Like, we're frustrated. You're frustrated. But know that at some point when Venables gets all of his dudes and they're ready to roll, and it's going to be faster now with the transfer portal, he's going to be able to accumulate all these guys. There's still residual from Mike Stoops. We were talking about this off air. There's still residual from Mike Stoops. There's still obviously residual from Alex Grinch. That culture doesn't just flip over like that. Those poor players, and I know I say that lightly, kind of a joking matter, but not. Let's see if you agree with me on this, Parker.
Okay.
When they start to see this thing avalanche a little bit on them, they're, oh, here we go again. Here we go again. And their confidence, you can just see it just going like a roller coaster, straight downhill. And it shows in their play. They'll play really good. That's the thing. Oklahoma, the defensive guys are really high, and then they get really low when things go bad. There's never a happy medium of just playing solid. or at least it hasn't been the last 2 games. They were really good the first 3 games of the season, and they were able to keep building on that high and the confidence. But the second K-State punched them in the mouth, and they were like, "Whoa, what the crap? Oh, here we go again. We're gonna give up 1,000 yards," and sure enough, they did. At what point does that culture start to flip over to Venable's toughness culture? And how long does that take?
Oh, that was an actual question. I
That was
thought it was
literally
rhetorical.
how long that does that take? Question mark.
uh, I don't know, man. I really don't because it depends on how many of these guys show up and are ready to make a day one impact. Like with somebody like PJ Atabare, for instance,
Yeah.
who is a freak show physically and fast, strong as all get out, has all the tools, but is still somewhat new to the position. Is that a guy that comes in and contends for playing time right off the bat, just based on that physique and that skill set? Or is he somebody that requires a lot of technical refinement to get to the point where you're comfortable putting him out there against Power 5 offensive tackles, and it takes him 2 or 3 years to be the type of player that's starting caliber at the University of Oklahoma?
Right.
I mean, you look at the guys that are starters right now, for instance. Ethan Downs was that dude from the get-go. But it took Reggie Grimes a little bit. It took him a little while to get there. So, how many of those guys are ready to come in and tangibly and immediately change this thing up?
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to. And there's not really an easy answer.
I mean, with the transfer, do you think? I guess my question is, do you think? I think at some point this season you're going to start seeing more positive momentum for Oklahoma defensively, but I just don't know when. Like I'm not for certain it's going to be next week because I think I honestly believe Sarkisian is a offensive mastermind. Like I believe that.
He's a good offensive mind. There's no denying it.
Yep.
The question becomes how healthy is Quinn Ewers?
Right.
Because
okay, but
with the way that secondary played today,
doesn't matter.
if you got well, and that may be true.
Okay.
With the way that secondary played today, it may not matter.
Yeah.
But obviously, Quinn Ewers is back in the fold, and he's full send. Then that's a dude that's going to have the capacity to dice you up a lot more so than somebody like Hudson Guard.
Yeah, I wonder if he plays tonight. Like, I honestly wonder that. Like,
they're set to kick off here in about 10 minutes.
Yeah,
I doubt, because I know from just talking to people around the program that he's not 100% yet. And even if he's at 85, 90, do you risk bringing him back for a game like West Virginia, knowing the biggest game of your season is on deck next week? And Oklahoma still is the biggest game in Texas this season, just as Texas is the biggest game of Oklahoma's season.
Right.
That's the game that has the capacity to, as we've talked about so many times, either leave that building riding the emotional high of victory and it sets the tone the rest of the way, or it tanks your season because it just takes all the air out of you.
Gotcha. Well, he is out today, so
there you go.
Per Pete Thamel. Do you foresee this defense rebounding this season? And that's something.
Well, it depends on what you would define and categorize as a rebound. Are they going to play better? Yeah, they will. Yeah. At some point, they will. They almost have to play better because, again, it's hard to fathom things getting any worse than they were today.
Right.
But are they going to be an elite unit? Are they going to be a top 20, top 25 unit nationally, statistically, over the second half of the season? I have my doubts. Are they going to be able to win you football games?
You have
win you football games as opposed to just not losing you football games. It doesn't look great in that regard right now.
No, I would essentially say that Oklahoma The talent is there. That's the problem. The talent is there. Like when you look across the board and you see who's on their defense talent, and you actually just go back 5 recruiting cycles, and that's kind of, you can go back 6 because there's a few stragglers, COVID. The talent is ridiculous on Oklahoma's team. That's the problem. Like it's so good. It's just like nobody can figure out how to get them to mesh. And I think that is kind of the query. I'm just like, how is that possible? Everybody else seems to be able to get their defense to mesh except for Oklahoma, no matter how talented they are right now. It is like a culture issue. And thank you, Mike Stoops. Thank you, Mike Stoops, for doing that to Oklahoma. He started it and has never ended.
It's been 4 years and we're still throwing Mike Stoops under the bus.
I mean, has it not? It still has not ended. Like ever since he's been, it just seems like no matter what coach comes in, it never gets fixed. Talent keeps getting there. You have top 100 dudes across the board on the defensive line.
Okay.
Why can't they fix it? Your starting safety is a number 35 player in the country, Billy Bowman. You have a number 70, whatever, top 100 player in Woody Washington. You have Jaden Davis, who was a top 150 player. You have Deshaun White, top 250. You have Aguebu, top 100. You have Danny Stutzman, top 150. Like, there is no excuses, bro. Like, are you seeing what I'm saying?
It is, I mean, it is an imbroglio. I concede that to you. What I will say
it just
is
doesn't
that,
make sense.
no, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but here's
no matter the coach.
My best explanation right now is that these guys just haven't been developed. And all of a sudden, I think here in 2022, the rest of the conference has caught up to Oklahoma in such a way that lack of development is starting to actually burn them now.
Yeah.
Because these are, and we've talked about it, and it's the most face value, obvious observation you can make, right? But these aren't Venables guys. These are Mike Stoops and Alex Grinch's guys.
Yeah.
And some of them are still really talented players.
Yeah.
It's not a knock on the whole defense, but they've gotten 9 months of Brent Venables.
Yeah.
And so, in hindsight, as we look at it now, probably went a little bit overboard with the suggestion that Venables was going to be able to turn things around quickly, because these are still players that were subject to the regimes of Mike Stoops and Alex Grinch for years. It's going to take a little while, if not just as long, for them to unlearn all of what's been wired into their brain and their bodies and relearn everything that Venables wants to drill into them.
So, I guess I forgot what I was going to say because it was actually pretty pertinent to what you were saying. It just seems like, and I said it earlier, and I mean it. I do think that, like you said, the development part, and that's kind of what I was getting at earlier when I was talking about Grinch and Stoops. I mean, Stoops' defense was very intricate, but it was so intricate that it was just like confusing to people, like super confusing. And I think in a way Venables is to an extent, but he still puts his players in position to, and he's not too, I guess, strong-willed, hard-headed, that he's not going to get away from things that aren't working normally. And I think you're going to see a change in the defense moving forward. I don't know what that change is going to be. It could be personnel. It could be the front, the alignment, maybe a 4-man more than 4-2-5, more than a 3-3-5. I mean, I think there's variations of ways that Oklahoma can combat this. It's just, does the development that they've done since they've arrived allow them to grow fast enough that they, because of their talent, allow them to at least stay distance until next year and maybe start winning some games. Because if you were going to pick right now, and I said, gun to your head, what's Oklahoma's final record right now at the end of the season?
Well, my first response would be, can you pull the gun back out in a few days when we know Dylan Gabriel's status?
Fair.
But you told me you're pulling the trigger right now.
7-5.
7-5.
Yeah, it's mine too. 7-5.
Like that's really what it feels like.
Yeah.
And this is why, like, here's the thing, man. This is why I'm all for getting some of the younger guys on the field a lot more than we're seeing them right now, is because the one thing they don't have to do that the older guys do is unlearn, right? Because they're a bunch of blank canvases.
That's true.
And I will say this: there's virtually no positives that you can take away from today, but Javonte Barnes played really well. Robert Spears-Jennings played really well down the stretch.
Yep.
Jaden Rowe got a little bit of burn, as did Gentry Williams. Grayson Halton saw quite a few snaps.
He looked good when he was in there.
Yeah, and so, oddly enough, the one guy that still didn't play a whole lot defensively was Jaren Kanak. But
he did.
Again, towards the end he did.
Yeah, third quarter.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make sense why he's not playing earlier. Ted Roof, I hope you're listening. Calling you out. Play him. Play Jaren Kanak. I was actually told by a couple of sources that was a strong topic of conversation inside the Switzer Center this week.
As it should be. And again, these younger guys don't have to unlearn. Let's see what they got.
Right.
Let's see what RSJ's got in an expanded role. Let's see what Grayson Halton offers off the edge. We've got a pretty good sense of what our Mason Thomas is going to be. And he might be the best freshman you have on the defensive side of the ball. It's probably a 2-horse race between him and Kanak. Yeah. But at this point, I am all for rotating some of those freshmen in a much expanded capacity, because something's got to change.
Yep.
And I'm a lot more comfortable asserting that it is personnel related than scheme related, as we've discussed.
All right, man. That probably should do it for this batch of post-game podcasts here. But so final thoughts real quick from me is, and I guess I can sum it up in one word if I'm Oklahoma: embarrassed. Embarrassed. This was an embarrassing performance on both sides of the ball, start to finish. And I think the other word I would want to use is they keep using the word strain. That's like really one of their famous tropes that they like to throw out there is strain. Okay, well, I'm going to call them strained because they look strained. They look strained. They look stressed. They look confused. They look pressured. They look discombobulated at times. They look lost, which is the same as discombobulated, I guess. They don't look right. And at some point this season, if I'm Brent Venables, I get the team together when they get, and I say, everybody to the meeting room now. And everybody that wants to win, everybody obviously wants to win. Anybody that has an issue with putting in extra work this week and making sure that we do things the right way, the proper way, offensively and defensively, and that we find a way to fix the issues, no matter how long it takes, no matter what you have to do. Obviously, your schoolwork matters and all that type of stuff, but everything else, like, your butt better be here. I don't care if you have a date. I don't care if you've got any of this. You better be in the Switzer Center. You better be watching film. You better be with your coaches. You better be talking to them constantly, figuring out what you have to do to get better. And the leaders of the team need to have a team meeting every day to make sure, and they need to have a checklist. You know, did this, let's work on this, and this today. Did we figure we're proficient at this now? Okay, cool. Move on to this. We'll come back to that and make sure we're proficient in it. But the point is they've got to figure out a way to make this thing work. Because if they don't, Parker, this thing could get even more out of hand than it already is.
Yeah, this could get ugly.
And it could get scary and ugly for this program. And that's not something you want year one for a head coach. And is this why Riley left? Is this why Riley left? Did he see this coming? I think it's a fair question. With everything that they lost last year, they lost 11 guys to the NFL. Is this why he just said, I'm out?
I mean, I'm gonna leave that one alone because we could have a whole nother 3-hour podcast on that question alone. But I guess my closing thoughts on this football game are A, you better figure this out and figure it out fast because it does not get any easier.
Mm-hmm.
You got Texas on deck, and then after that, you got a 5-0 Kansas team. So if you don't get this thing turned around, you could be sitting at 3-4 heading into the bye week.
Yeah.
And that's very, very much within the realm of possibility right now. And secondly, I think, man, you got to, and I know I said it earlier, you got to make some tough decisions. You're going to have to make some decisions that maybe you're not 100% comfortable with. You're going to have to piss somebody off. You're going to have to probably fight your own conscience. But at what point have you tried everything else? You know?
Right.
At what point are you willing to acknowledge, okay, we've explored every avenue except this one. Let's see where this one gets us.
Yeah.
It's a loss that should sting, and everybody in that locker room should take it as a personal challenge, and it should be embedded and seared into the minds of every single one of those players. 55-24.
Huh.
That doesn't happen at the University of Oklahoma. It doesn't. They hadn't lost a Big 12 game by that many points since 2014. And 2014 was about the worst year of this millennium for Oklahoma football. It's not the kind of company you want to be keeping.
No.
So figure it out fast. I don't know what that looks like. That's the coach's responsibility, not mine. All I'm saying is, man, this may be accompanied by some tough decisions, but some decisions that need to get made for the good of your football team.
Yeah.
Because, and I want to echo what Brent Venables said in postgame as well. And he got a little bit choked up. He got a little bit emotional, as is his tendency at times. But one of the things he said, and it looked like he was kind of struggling to get it out for whatever reason, but he said, talent doesn't win games. Teams win games.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now,
that was my question, actually. Yeah.
Let's see that applied, because what I'm suggesting is that maybe a football player that's not quite as talented as another, in your eyes, offers you a better opportunity to win games than the alternative. That's something you got to consider in the aftermath of a loss like this.
Yeah. I agree. Everything you said. We can't. This is just. It's hard. It's hard to even get over with this podcast because we have so many things like you want to say about everything that just happened today. But we'll have another podcast. We'll also have the YouTube live coming up here later on this week for you all to vent to us and yell at us and scream at us and call us names too, because that's what we're here for, a punching bag for you guys, I guess. But yeah, that's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners Postgame Podcast. Oklahoma lost 55-24, the worst loss in the season I can remember in a long time. Something needs to be fixed. Everything needs to be fixed, and they better fix it fast. They have Texas coming up next week. I know we give this spiel about coming on the OU Insider, and I just don't feel like it's right now. So if you want to join, join. If you don't, I guess. But we hope you enjoyed this podcast. For Parker Thune, my name is Brandon Drumm. You guys have a blessed day.